Hey everyone, so today I read Matthew 14, Mark 6, and Luke 9, and a lot of different things happening. And so remember that all of these books are written from different perspectives, right, as we talked about for the last few times, and they're not necessarily in chronological order, and that's not the goal or intent of really any of these authors. Luke is the closest at being a chronological ordering, but even there are some discrepancies, and again, that's not the point. The point was not to be a chronological sequence of events, but a retelling prophetically of the way that Jesus fits these different roles that he is portraying as king, as servant, as man, and as God. And so so what we see here, a lot of similar events overlap each other in these three chapters from these different books. And the first thing that I noticed, well, actually, the one big thing that I noticed is that Jesus is proving himself to be a greater prophet and a greater king than any of the rest that had come in the Old Testament. And so in Matthew 14, verse 17, we see Jesus multiply the 5 loaves and 2 fish, right? He blesses them, breaks them, and gives thanks for them. And then he feeds 5,000 men plus women and children. And so as many as 20,000 people got fed by 5 loaves of bread. And I didn't even realize this. I don't know how I missed this in all my times reading 2 Kings, but in 2 Kings 4:42 and following, Elisha, the prophet, he actually gives 20 loaves of bread and he blesses them and is able to feed 100 men with these loaves. And so obviously the ratios are much less. You have more bread and less men, significantly less men, and no women or children in this event. And it was actually the sons of the prophets is what they called themselves, these people who were prophetic voices in Israel at the time, and they were meeting with him. And so we see Jesus being a better prophet in this way, with capital P. And then in Mark 6, we see Jesus saying that a prophet receives honor everywhere except in his own town. And this is actually a reference back to 2 Chronicles 36:15 and 16, where God is giving a summation of the time in which Zedekiah was king. And he says that all these prophets came and spoke in their regions, but no one believed them, no one received them in their own hometowns. And so it's really interesting how Jesus is kind of playing off of them and saying, in the same way that this happened to them, in the same way that they rejected, I too am being rejected. And he's going to make a parable here in a little while to talk about that more in detail. And so then later on in chapter 6 of Mark, Jesus has compassion on the crowd. And this is, again, talking about the feeding of the 5,000. But it says that he had compassion on the crowd because they were like sheep without a shepherd. This is a detail that I didn't catch in the other passages. So that they were like sheep without a shepherd, which reminded me immediately of Ezekiel 34, where God is talking about how the shepherds of Israel, the leaders, right, whether they are priests and rabbis or kings and governors, none of them are doing the job that they were called to do. They're not honoring the responsibility that God entrusted them with to protect their people. They were being self-centered and self-interested and providing for themselves, but leaving their people to starve and in many ways. And so God says that he will rebuke the terrible leaders, the bad shepherds, and he will himself be a shepherd, but that he will appoint his servant David to be a shepherd. And again, just like we've talked about before, this is not saying literally David is going to rise from the dead. It's been hundreds of years since he died at this point. But that Jesus, the new David, the new capital D, David, this new king, was going to come in and fulfill the promise given to David and to all of his sons, that there would be a seed that would come from David and come from Abraham and come from Adam that would, well, from Eve, really, the woman, and who would completely destroy the works of evil and would establish an eternal kingdom. And this is what's happening. And so Jesus is accomplishing this. And his compassion on the crowds, recognizing them as sheep without a shepherd, is him beginning to fulfill that role of being their shepherd, being their king. And so, yeah, it's just beautiful. But then lastly, I noticed in Luke 9:28 and following that at the Transfiguration, right, he proclaims that, some of you will not die before seeing the kingdom of God coming. And then 8 days later, Jesus goes up to the mountain and he brings 3 of his disciples with him that were there at that talk. And so he's not talking about like, I'm going to come back, in all my glory in the amount of time that you guys live. A lot of people interpret it that way and they're like, that didn't happen. And we can tell from the context that he's talking about the next 8 days when he reveals his glory to them on this mountain. And during the Transfiguration, it says that a cloud enveloped them, and that the voice of God spoke and said, "This is my son, my chosen one." And what's interesting is that the same kind of thing happened back with Moses on Mount Sinai. And so this cloud envelops the mountain, and he hears from them, and he hears from God, and is on there for, I think it's like 6 nights, maybe 7 days, and just crazy stuff's happening. But so Jesus is doing this, but Moses comes with him. Moses and Elijah appear and are talking to him. And so it's kind of a reflection of the law and the prophets, and but also I'm sure there's a lot of other things going on in that conversation that I wish we could have heard, but won't until we get to heaven, I guess. But so God is working through all of these things to demonstrate that he has chosen a better king and a perfect prophet who can do the works of God that no one else could, and who can lead his people in a way that no one else has the ability to. And so in his presence is the prophetic king.